You either really have to face it that Maduro's in the right now, which is one way out, or you were in the wrong to support him earlier. What is the position of the kind of the left? What should it be now, do you think?
Well, that's an unfair characterisation, if I might say so, Evan, because clearly the circumstances have changed substantially in Venezuela over recent years. The collapse in the oil price and, of course, these violent protests, which have been aided and abetted by the United States of America, who have been funding opposition groups and have a very shady record going back many decades of interfering in Latin America, right back to Chile, where President Nixon said he was going to make the economy scream. And we've had these manufactured shortages with factory owners stopping production of products to create these shortages in the shops, and it's precisely the same tactics that were used against Allende in Chile in 1973 and led to the overthrow of his government with Pinochet.
So your response to seeing opposition leaders bundled out in the night, and taken away and arrested, is to condemn the United States. I just want to be clear. That is basically your response.
No, not at all. No, again, that's unfair, Evan. Human rights are inalienable and universal. And I'm not saying, and I'm not here as an apologist for the Venezuelan government. Clearly, they've made mistakes. They didn't do enough to diversify the economy. But look, they're under incredible pressure. And there's a very one-sided, one-eyed view of the situation there very often in the British media. I'm yet to hear any criticism of the right-wing opposition or indeed the United States intervention there and the sanctions. And clearly it can't be right, can it, in a situation where there is a massive crisis in Venezuela at the moment, to impose sanctions on the country? Surely it would be far better, wouldn't it, to actually try and bring the sides together to facilitate talks and to encourage the right-wing opposition to stop these protests on the street. Just imagine if this was happening in this country, or indeed in the United States of America. Many of the people involved in those protests, if it was in the US, would be facing prison terms of between 5 and 20 years.
Let me put the same points to Tom Harris there. Do you think, are you among those who think Jeremy Corbyn should recant his old views and say, look, I utterly condemn what Maduro's doing?
I think he should. I mean, I think we have to distinguish between two very different traditions in the Labour Party. The Labour Party, the traditional Labour Party in the modern era since the end of the Second World War, the party of Attlee, of Wilson, of Blair, they managed to distance themselves quite effectively from some of these Marxist revolutionary outfits. Jeremy Corbyn and the hard left, they've never met a banana republic they didn't like. Now, when Jeremy Corbyn started talking about Venezuela and talked about how it was an example that Britain should follow, no one really paid much attention because he was an anonymous backbencher who was known to say eccentric things. But now that he's become leader of the Labour Party, and since he almost became Prime Minister, I think we have an absolute right to know whether he now regrets what he said or recants what he said. It would be a sign of political maturity, actually, if he came out of hiding and said, look, I got it wrong.
Chris Williamson, do you think he'll do that?
Well, I think there's certainly things that the Venezuelan government have got wrong, and that doesn't need to be called out. But I'm not sure what Tom is saying here. I mean, we know Tom is a free marketeer. But look, what was the situation like in Venezuela before Hugo Chavez came to power? It was a chaotic, terrible inequality in that country, grotesque poverty.
Chris, let me ask you this.
Measures that were brought.
Let me just ask you this question. Do you think you're closer to Chavez, Maduro in your political philosophy, or Tony Blair?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think, look, I don't like to sort of characterise these things as a matter of left and right. It's really, for me, it's a question of right and wrong.
Can you not answer that question? Can you really not answer that question?
Let me answer it in my own way. I think the point is, when a government is doing good things, as they certainly were under Hugo Chavez, huge reduction in poverty, investment in healthcare, housing, and really improve the quality of life for ordinary people, that's surely a good thing that we should celebrate, shouldn't we? So, trying to put up these sort of false dichotomies about, is it closer, are you close to Blair, are you closer to Maduro, I think it's kind of an irrelevant question, really. Surely
I have to give 5 seconds. Last word. I'm sorry.
How can we get the sides back around a table and stop these protests going on the street?
Tom, I'm sorry. We've given you far too little time. Just in a few words, would you not say that there's hypocrisy all over the place here? People don't condemn Saudi Arabia while they're condemning Venezuela.
The important point is that nobody, certainly no one in the Labour Party, has ever looked at Saudi Arabia and said, hey, look, there's an example for Britain to follow. Whereas Jeremy Corbyn has explicitly said, as has Diane Abbott, as has Chris Williamson, said that, using the example of Venezuela can benefit the people of Britain. Now, that is a shocking way to behave if you're not prepared to turn around and say, look, I got it wrong. This is a Marxist government that's locking up opposition, is killing people and torturing people. Doesn't matter what intervention has taken place by the United States, the CIA are not forcing Maduro's government to torture and imprison people.